You're tuned into RX Radio. Movement prescribed. Brought to you by Prescript.com. A personalized approach to keeping you healthy and making your best even better. Your hosts, Dr. Jordan Shallow and Dr. Jordan Ginta.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of RX'D Radio. A bit of a weird one, and I can hear her laughing in the background. So was lucky enough to corner Kayla Lee Physio, which some of you may or may not. Eh? Hard to do, yes. It's really hard to. I mean, at this place, it's kind of hard to do. It's a big Airbnb. Sorry, she's chatting in the background and clearly disrupting my work. What else is new? Kayla came on to talk about applied women's physiology and training. I think a topic that is so poorly discussed by people I don't think qualified, just from a chromosomal standpoint, not really qualified to talk on the subject. And all a man is doing when he's talking about female physiology is reading to you. And like I kind of got uncomfortable when people started reading books to me past the age of like 7. Like when like, oh, you want to tell you a bedtime story? No, fuck off. I can read myself. I'm going to bed. Leave me alone. And I like put on a Kid Rock album and then fell asleep. But like I don't know why people find it like insistent to listen to a man talk about like female physiology. And I make a colorful, maybe colorful is probably the wrong word, example of or a parallel to this in the episode. But I think some underwriting physiology pointers that men should know. But I think just like anything, training a man, training a woman, training an athlete. The psychology trumps the physiology. So insights around, the female psychology, and if you're anything like me, is probably like your worst possible skill that you have. But understanding that, look, female market's a big market, and it's an underserviced market. So upskilling your education around this subset of the population is super, super beneficial and super impactful. So Kayla's come up with has developed applied women's physiology and training course, a big emphasis on applied, synthesizing the information that's out there, kind of arming you with the research and the data, the hard facts, and then mixing in obviously like the important psychological overlay, which is something that, you try and really drive home from a coach's perspective. Otherwise, you're just a programmer. So we talk a little bit about what's kind of going on within the course, details around that. Out of the gate, if you don't want to wait till the end, spoiler alert, go to www.kaylaleefphysio.com. Registration is currently live. It is a 2-month course, so it runs the entirety of 8 weeks. If you have any questions, email her directly at info@kaylaleefphysio.com, on Instagram @kaylaleephysio. Without any further ado, as I am out of breath as per usual, hope you guys enjoy the episode. We'll see you next week.
All right, never mind. We'll just talk about like the structural and the
It's recording right now.
Huh?
It's recording right now.
Okay.
Well, I feel like this is weird because I host this podcast, but like I don't feel like a host of this relationship because I usually call the shots on the podcast. So for me to be a host right now is like.
You think I call the shots in the relationship?
Oh, you decide when to get like when you decide when like things are good and when if we're fighting, it's like you've decided. That's how now this is happening.
Okay.
So it's like I don't know, but I think that might be the most like overarching sentiment of the podcast is I have no idea what I'm doing.
No.
And I think when it comes to because the biggest part of I think the biggest market for trainers. Obviously, it's a male-dominated industry just by, I don't know, your aptitude, what people are into. Guys are usually more into lifting weights as kids, and it just evolves into like, oh, fuck, people pay me money for this. But I think the biggest market for clients is women because women listen and have less of an ego than men do. Like, there's no more of a tip of the hat to me to a guy that has a female trainer. And for like not creepy reasons. You see some people, it's like, all right, this guy definitely see, I'm going to use the term shirt cock it. You're not going to know what it means.
No.
Okay. But someone out there is going to know what it means. But anyways.
Is it a Canadian thing?
No, it's just a guy that's creeping through your window kind of thing.
Okay.
But I think there's a huge market for, especially now after COVID and everything, for because it's different when I have friends, I have a friend, bless you, Shane, that is getting married and has never lived for any length of time with his significant other, which is like, you really want to get to know someone, live with them, especially in our situation where we travel a lot. But like, I feel like clients or trainers that are men get away with not really getting to know their clients that are female because they only see them for an hour in a week. And like, even if you accumulate 3 hours a week across like 5 years, it's not that much time when you really think, relatively speaking. So it's like, one of the takeaways from this might be that men that train women have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, well, like, I've been on the other side of that. So my first personal trainer was a male. And so I've sort of been on both sides, I guess, because when I first started actually personal training, a lot of my clients were men as well. So, you know, when I was training with a personal trainer, I didn't know anything about training at the time. So I just did what he said, pretty much. And then looking back, like, you know, I was that girl who, you know, was running on the treadmill and like, you know, trying not to eat too much and like restricting calories and things like that. But he really got me into like lifting weights and, you know, doing more sort of functional work and working on my movement patterns and things like that. And then so when I started training males, I just thought it was the same for a female and a male. And when I sort of transitioned into more of training females, I sort of found there are times when like men are just the same, like all the time. All the time.
There's one sitting right here.
There is no change. Like, it's just, you know, unless you're hungry or tired, like, there is no change in your emotions. You're just like...
I feel like this is just going to turn into an expose on living with me.
No, well, it's great. Like, I mean, we didn't even start living together. We just lived and traveled together. So that was full on. But I think, you know, the last sort of couple of months in COVID, in lockdown, has sort of been our only time where we've actually lived together. And I sort of found that strengthened our relationship. I thought that being in one spot for a more amount of time and being in this small apartment in Bondi Beach that we were in, I thought that strengthened our relationship.
Have you ever... Do you guys get The View in Australia? Do you know what The View is?
Is it a TV show?
Yeah, it was. It might still be. I don't know. I feel like I'm on an episode of The View, except there's no Whoopi Goldberg.
And what does that mean? Am
I like... No, because like The View is an all-female talk show host show, and they'll bring on guests that are female, but they bring on men, and it's just like if Mount Rushmore was like a bunch of women, and they were just like pillorying one guy in the middle. Except it's just you.
Do you think... What do you mean? Come on.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, because I mean, it's just like, I think male trainers that don't I think there's a certain level of like, at the very least, understanding or awareness. I wouldn't even go as far as understanding, where it's just like, I'm aware of these habits and trends of females because I live with you. I don't understand them. I don't claim to know, you know, how to divide by pi or any of this stuff, like this quantum level shit you guys think about. But like, I think when it comes to the nuts and bolts of like being a good trainer and getting the results you need, like one of the things I always tell people in the course is like, look, it's about peaking buy-in, right? And like the way you peak buy-in is like obviously results, but the way you get results is like understanding the psychology, because psychology trumps physiology all day.
Yeah.
Enter training females.
Look, I just think it's training people. I just think, you know, like, you get females who, you know, they don't change. They, you know, are the same person sort of like all throughout the month, or it's just, you know, understanding people, I think. Like, and I speak about this a lot, like on Instagram and in our last podcast as well. It's just about having empathy for females. Like, when I started training females, it was just knowing that, you know, there are certain times of the month where they just are not feeling it. And I just thought, oh, it's just one of those days. Like, it's just one of those. But then it would happen, like, when I was training small group classes and things like that, it was just like everyone kind of was sort of on the same cycle, and there would be like every 3 weeks you could sort of see a trend in like not feeling it today, and it's just having that sort of empathy to like, you know, just adjust the program and, you know, auto regulate the program as you go, just as a trainer, and just sort of, you don't really have to understand. It's just having that empathy and just listening to your client. It's just like if you were training a male as well, you know, the same thing would happen. You know, I'm not feeling like men need empathy too. And, you know, some men are very sensitive and, you know, they might not be feeling it one week or something like that. So it's just, you know.
Yeah, but with people. I mean, and like, don't get me wrong, like I have fair few friends that fuck with their own hormones as men, and like, you know, it's usually more so like, oh shit, he's gonna have to re-drywall, not like, okay, he's gonna miss a rep. But like, it can be more predictable, right? Like, rather than like a friend like, you know, going off cycle and really sending it with the drugs. It's just like with a female, like you can predict it. And I think like that's where I think there is some merit to understand at the very least, because like even when you have an understanding and you start to read in more about like, you know, endocrinology and things like that, and how like, you know, the neuroendocrine system is really going to be like, that's going to be what dictates your metabolism. That's going to be what dictates, you know, energy levels, mood, lethargy, things like that. And it's like there is a certain level of predictability in, and like whether it's, you know, relationship personally or relationship with a client, being that predictive value is super, I think it's super beneficial, albeit pretty contentious.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is to, you know, for the longest time, like I just trained normally, like every single week. It was just like I personally didn't really realize that much of a difference in my training. You know, I might have gotten frustrated at certain times because, you know, I didn't feel it or whatever, but I wasn't really that aware of it. And so I think for a female, like being able to track that and being able to create more awareness around that time of the month, and, you know, like it is predictable if you have a normal cycle, and, you know, dysfunctional cycles are a whole nother topic completely, but just having that awareness and, you know, tracking for a few months and then being able to recognize patterns, it can really, instead of feeling like you're being sent back on a certain week and you're not feeling strong or you're not feeling energetic, use it as a tool. Like you can use it. There are certain times during the month where, you know, you're able to push it hard. Like estrogen is what's called like anti-catabolic, which means like aids in muscle repair and you know, prevents muscle loss. So that can be used to your advantage at certain times of the month during your training to really push hard and just sort of know, you know, what you can do, how hard you can push yourself, and program around that. So program, you know, higher reps and higher sets and higher volume and higher intensities, and then less rest and things like that. So yeah, it is super interesting. And a lot of women see it as an inconvenience because it's something that, you know, we get this thing, it's kind of annoying, like every month. And then, you know, for, you know, a couple of years, we might be like trying to reproduce, and then that's when it's useful. But yeah, things like when it gets sort of dysfunctional, when you are training really hard or you do get really lean, and it's not you know, it's not happening every month, then, you know, there are things that we need to sort of adjust in our training as well when those things pop up, to make sure, you know, further down the track, if that was to ever happen, or you ever wanted to have a baby, to get pregnant, then, you know, we need to sort of work around that as well to make sure that, you know, your training loads aren't too high or you're not restricting calories too low. Because like personally that happened to me for a while as well, and it's something that I went through, and I didn't really think it was that much of an issue, but then, you know, further down the track, it was sort of like, you know, I really should get this under control, you know, because I want to be able to predict these times and what is happening with my body and become sort of more aware. So I think it is really empowering to have that awareness and to track the menstrual cycle. And yeah, it's something that I suggest people do and sort of know how they can regulate their programming and exercise around certain times of the month.
It's always interesting to me because I mean, I very much sit at the sidelines. Like, and the same reason I don't train bowlers is the same reason I don't talk about women's physiology, because I'm not a fucking bowler and I'm not a woman. But it's always interesting to me when I look on the internet and I see people like having knife fights, like, no, women should train the same, no, women should train. And it's always a man saying it. And it's like, I struggle with, like, I'm fully happy not understanding some things. Like, there's some things that if I want to know, I fucking want to know. Like, I'll dive head deep into anything that I want to know. But there's some things like, all right, I kind of stay in my lane on some shit, and I just like, all right, that seems really complicated. Like, I don't care necessarily, like, how my computer works. I hit play or on or whatever the fuck, and it turns on. It's like, with female physiology and all that, it's like, I'm sure that's really complicated. And if I were to get computer advice, I would go to someone with a computer science degree. If I were to get women advice, I would probably go to someone that was born a woman. Yeah. What's your take on, like, the noise that gets created from men around this topic? Because it's hard, right? Like, I deal with fucking pencil necks all the time who, like, you know, they might be good programmers, but they're shit coaches. Yeah. Because they know all the theory, and that's all a man can do is just read theory.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it comes back to that evidence-based model in the end. So, like, you know, you've got your research, you've got your personal professional experience, and then you've got, like, client values as well. So one thing that a male coach will never really have is that personal experience. But in saying that, you know, they can go and look at the research. They can, you know, they can speak to their female clients. I don't think it's wise for men to sort of give advice or advise on it. I think they can empathize. If their female client comes to them, they can sort of empathize with them. And then, you know, I don't think they necessarily need to say, well, this is why we're doing this, because you're on this week of the period and we should be doing this with your programming and increasing your reps and decreasing your rest period and things like that. I don't necessarily think they need to go into that amount of detail with their female clients. I think it's important for them to know, but I think it's more important for them to know and learn about this stuff just from an empathetic point of view, because you'll never have that personal experience. You can talk to a partner or something about it and try and understand a little bit more that way. But when a male is talking on it, it's just, or like educating on it, I mean, it's great that they're creating more conversation around it, because I do think there needs to be more conversation around it, because the longest time, you know, females were just sort of treated like, you know, men in their training. And, you know, there is evidence now to suggest, and a lot of the research has been done on males, and, you know, females have been included in these research, but their data has been left out because it was sort of more of like an outlier. But it's like asking why was it an outlier? Like, why is, you know, women's physiology and you know, reactions to training different than men in certain studies and things like that. So I think you know, it's great that there's conversation around it, but I think you know, they'll never have that personal experience. So it's just about, you know, just trying to understand and, you know, speak to your clients, let them come to you. Don't tell them what to do, because, like, a woman doesn't want to really be told, like, what to do with their period. Like, they don't want that advice from a man.
I always think of it this way. There's, like, a super ghetto neighborhood, and I'm actually thinking of one girl in particular, but I can't name her name. But, like, there's a certain type of person from this sub-community of Windsor called Forest Glade, and, like, the 7 people that listen to this from Windsor will have a laugh, that they're white chicks that date black guys, and then all of a sudden think they're, like, licensed to 400 years of oppression, that, like, get up. And it's like, and the one thing that I find too is, like, females for the most part don't have a really good grasp on, like, the physiology and endocrinology behind it. So, like, here a lot of men, I think, are getting their information by just like, oh, I have a girlfriend. It's like, okay, that does not necessarily license you a minor in physiology and endocrinology. But and in the same way, like, you know, when Susie What's-Her-Face from Forest Glade is up your tree about black oppression and things like that. And meanwhile, you're looking at Casper the Friendly Ghost wearing baby fat, juicy couture sweatpants and shit and slides in Tecumseh Mall at noon in the afternoon, on like a Tuesday or something. It's like, it's in the same way that I think people use, they use non-reputable sources to license them, access to talking about this information with zero validity, which is always it's frustrating for me, and just as a peripheral outsider, because I've had a handful of female clients, and kind of to your point earlier, they operate more like men. They operate more like men in the sense that they're whatever it is, they're type A personalities or something like that. Yeah. Albeit, the hormones are still going to dictate a lot of the training, but I self-select for my audience, I think, pretty well when it comes to clients, because it's this is the way I am, this is kind of my approach, and everything else, I don't really talk about that kind of stuff. But it's always interesting to me to see the backs and forths and points of contention around female physiology and training between two men. It's literally watching two trashy white chicks with juicy across their back of their sweatpants fight about black oppression. You're just what are you talking? Please shut up, right? At the very least, a female in a case that's less informed will have more information because of the experience.
Yeah. I mean, and, certain studies could say this, but then, there's really not that much research out there on it. So, I've kind of gone out and tried to find, what there is currently on it. And yeah, it's, there's always going to be something in research and things like that don't necessarily give us that much information or don't necessarily correlate well with real life. So the findings that you find.
Yeah, well, I think the interesting thing is it's always about, and I can do this well in training because I train, but the interpretation and the context, I think, is what's super valuable. Research studies by their design are designed to remove the value proposition. That's what makes them reproducible. So it's unless you have someone with experience to interpret the research for you and actually lens, everyone likes to hide behind the veil, oh, it depends. Right, I feel men do that more so than not when talking about female physiology and training, where it's because they don't have really an applied experience in it, they don't have any leg to stand on when it comes to looking at this, this topic. It's somewhat of a nebulous topic from a research standpoint, looking at it with any sort of experiential context. So all they're doing for us, all really and I hate to I'm not going to name names because you're on the podcast, and I think a certain level of respect should be had for I fire off the mouth when everyone else, but I think there's a certain level when I watch someone go on Instagram and voice their opinion and they're a man, it's look, I know how to fucking read. Yeah. You're not offering anything but a summary of the abstract, the methods, the design, and the outcome. I know how to read. This isn't useful to me at all. Right. So I think being taught women's physiology in an applied manner from a born woman, or at least that's what you told me. Sorry, I had to. But is something that so I think it could lend a lot. When I want to learn, I mean, you deal with me on the phone with random people all over the world every day. When I want to learn about sprinting, I get on the phone and I call what I think to be probably one of the best sprint coaches in the world, and he's mentored under Charlie Francis and all this stuff. It's and to the same way, I think when people want to learn about training and treatment and all that I might get a phone call here and there, and it's I can't imagine, yet I see it every fucking day, that people would want to learn about this from a man.
Yeah. And also, the research is taking averages. It's not taking every single subject into account. Right. It's taking in, assumptions that, a female's on a regular cycle, assumptions that, she is of this age, and she is, young or older, or, she's training or she's not training. That could also affect the outcomes of the study as well, you know, because you're going to get different effects in trained females than you are in an untrained female to a certain degree.
Defining what's a trained and untrained too, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's like, I know what research will tout as a college age male well trained. It's like, this guy's done 2 years of chest and biceps in the recreational gym at some state college that you're funding this shitty study out of.
Yeah. And I sort of found, like, when I sort of got more into this and more interested about it, I found that there wasn't really anyone that I could sort of look to, or any sort of, you know, resources that I could find that really had that much information on it. And what I did sort of read, like, from my knowledge as just a personal trainer and just, you know, a female in general, and some of the things I read, I was like, this is not how I've learnt this. And, you know, during various university degrees and, you know, exercise and sports science and courses and things like that, and through my own reading and research, some of the findings that I did read, I was like, hang on, like, this doesn't make sense. Like, this doesn't align with what I've already learnt. And, you know, I went out and I compared it to, you know, other findings and other research and other, you know, educators in the space. And yeah, some things didn't add up. So I think there is still a lot to be desired from this topic. And I think there's not really a lot of information out there. And I think especially women, male coaches, yes, like, need to know and understand this, and be able to empathize with their clients. But I think women in general, they don't know that much about this either. I mean, going back to not even that long ago, women were told not to get their heart rate above 140 beats per minute when pregnant. They were told not to, like, raise their core body temperature too much. Recent research that's come out, and they've been told certain exercises for, you know, post-pregnancy and decreasing, like, the separation of the abs and, like, pelvic floor exercises. Even this, like, research not even that long ago was telling us the opposite of what we know now. So it's always evolving and it's always changing, and it's just sort of keeping on top of that. And females in general, just, we don't even know. Like, we're still confused. I get females who have gone through pregnancy and childbirth and, like, I've not been told what to do afterwards, or I wasn't told I could do this while I was pregnant, and it's just, I think there needs to be more education around this. I don't necessarily know why there isn't that much education around it. I mean, you know, I think doctors do have the training to give this information, but when it comes to clients that come to me with certain issues, certain, like, female related issues, I'm like, so were you told this? Were you told this? And it was like, no, I wasn't told anything. And yeah, I think it's super important, especially sort of long term, like going into, you know, that postpartum period, and females especially, you know, when they're training or if they lose their menstrual cycle, things like that, they need to know what to do, and they need to know what to expect in the future as well, like going all the way from, you know, menses when they first get a period to, you know, through to childbirth, through to menopause, and you know, even training through menopause. Like, I get women coming to me, they're on hormone replacement therapy after menopause, and it's like, well, like, how does this change? How does this change the way I should train, or how does this change what my body's going through? So yeah, so that's sort of a
I just think the research always, and probably like, again, I'm a peripheral outsider. I usually fall asleep as you read all this stuff, and you say a few things, and I go, oh, that's interesting, and then I wake up the next morning, I thought it was a dream. But it seems like there's no greater subset of research that seems to suffer from, like, the reversion to the mean principle, which is like, reversion to the mean is like, if you ask, like, 10 people for advice, 5 people will give you advice that cancels out the opposite of the other 5 people. And so you're left asking 10 people and left with no real place to go. So that's kind of what, like, reversion to the mean means. And I find with like, there's literally 2 divided camps. It goes, well, in this 2 weeks, you do this and eat this. And then there's another camp that goes, on this 2 weeks, you literally do the exact opposite of that. And it's just like, and then where do you go, right? Like, and I know when I look at like training coming in more of my wheelhouse and there's contentious issues, I just go to my experience. And now the thing is, I have a lot of experience with that, but I don't have a lot of experience when it comes to obviously being a female. So what do? I delegate, like any good businessman. I delegate to someone who, at the very least, has a black belt in being a female, right? In the same way that I've stopped running 10 years ago, or also known as 60 kilograms ago. So when I need to brush up on running stuff, I go to a dude that runs a lot and does a lot of stuff with running. Or I go to, if I want to know more about breathing, it's like I go to the guy who literally wrote the book about breathing, right? He'll have looked at the same research I have, but he'll have more experience. And I can siphon off that experience, and that can allow and lend me some context in dealing with certain situations. Where it's like, I think especially, and I know this podcast is predominantly men, and I can guarantee you that most of these men, every male, and I can speak for them clearly because I'm a voted representative. I'm not. But like most men get into training because they want to train athletes. And it's like, okay, that's great. And then you realize athletes have no fucking money. And you're just like, okay, I guess it's 30-year-old women who like just got divorced, and that's kind of your wheelhouse. But it's like, there's no more, I think, greater market to have an understanding with, to get results in, than a female client. And there's no more misrepresented and misunderstood market than the female client. So it's like, if I'm me 5 years ago and I needed to pick a career path based purely off monetary upswing, it would be number one by a landslide would be specializing in female training. Because people that do it with Instagram accounts, and we're not going to name names again, but fuck if we could. And it's like, they do it just because there's no one else doing it, and they crush it. Right, I would go females first and then geriatrics second.
Yeah.
Because those are the people with money.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, and then old women, fucking jackpot. Right, like, and obviously don't do it for the money, and like you likely won't get you far. But I think if there was an upskill I could push on male clients to really like diversify the old portfolio, like
a
lot of your bro your bro client high five bench 3 days a week crowd, like they're not coming back. Right, they were probably laid off with 3 million other people, and like they're not going to spend the $70 an hour on your dumb ass. Yeah. But you know who will is the smart woman that has kids and like a mortgage and like saw ahead for this and has a 401k. And it's like, I think if you can even just have like a modicum of an upper hand when it comes to like actual information and like valuable information that can give you context, that investment is like, that's where I would go if I had to do all this again. Because I just think people just don't fundamentally understand. And the perpetuation, just from like me through osmosis learning this stuff from you, it's like, man, I can't believe more people aren't talking about this, because it seems like there's just 2 men on either side of the table and none of them have like a smoking gun. Like none of them have like, I have an opinion. It's like, I have a different opinion. It's like, hey, wow, this is all the time we have for today. This is brilliant. And it's like, there's no one that I think has entered into the space that's been able to like look at all the research, like this corpus of work over the last, I don't know, probably like 40, 50 years, obviously in higher concentration, volume, and frequency now, and be like, all right, this is what we know. This is what we don't know. But when we don't know, this is where we can look to gain information and give us context in the time to make a decision.
Yeah. And I guess that's sort of why I was looking in different places. I was looking to sort of get everything sort of in one place, like from, puberty all the way through to menopause. I had to correlate like a lot of information from different sources, and I wanted to put it all together for people so that I could educate people more, and like male, female athletes, trainers, which is why I designed this course. And I found, because I'm a coach and a physio, like I found there was never really any sort of way I could upskill my knowledge of, pregnancy and childbirth and that sort of area as well. So where I sort of learnt all my information was through my physio degree and physio courses in terms of like, pregnancy and pelvic floor and childbirth and like the ins and outs of pelvic floor and pelvic pain and like, PCOS and endometriosis and all these different conditions. There was nothing really as a coach that I could go to unless you were physio certified to go and learn a course like that. So what I've sort of done is sort of brought everything together, I think, in a broad sense of like female physiology and training. And I've created this course that, I think can help a lot of people learn more and sort of have it all in one place. So
it's weird how information gets gets put behind lock and key, almost like it's like a boss in a video game. It's like you got to beat all like the little bosses to get to the big boss.
Yeah.
And like the more it's like the more valuable the information, like the harder and further into the game you need to play to learn it. Like, because I think there is so much paradox and there's so much contrast that requires experience. And I don't think it's for lack of like, I think the education model up till now, like for better or for worse, it's what we have. But I think that a graded exposure and forced experience is what gives you that third pillar of evidence, right? So that when you introduce some of these advanced concepts, like you have a foothold and a basis found in your own experience that you can make decisions when you understand that, like, oh shit, like I'm on the other side of this Dunning-Kruger Valley. I don't think I know anything, but I know a shit ton. But my real skill is, experience and knowing how to apply things. I can now take on more information, and now I can use my experience to help guide this, this little, I don't want to say contrasting, but like, it's like math. I always think of math going like, you could, if you wanted to, take a kid at like 5 years old and make them learn calculus. You don't. You teach them 2 + 2. Right, and then 2 + 2, and then you have one class that teaches them letters and one class that teaches them numbers and math, and then all of a sudden you hit like, I don't know, it's the 6th grade in Canada, it might be somewhere different. All of a sudden then there's letters with the numbers, and you're like, hold the fucking phone,
yeah.
Right? But if you were trying to learn letters and you were trying to learn numbers, you're trying to learn English and trying to learn arithmetic and learn cursive writing and learn, basic mathematics, and then you're also trying to learn them together. Right, like try to pronounce the phonetics of the letter A, but then also thinking A means alpha and it can be a variable in an equation. You're like, hold, what? I think it's the same thing with like a lot of the physiology and the training stuff. The problem is education's so decentralized that you have, what I would consider to be good trainers and good coaches, but you have an education system that's still built hierarchical that doesn't necessarily, walk them through this pathway if, they choose to not go down. And some of the best coaches I know, best therapists I know, are people who didn't decide to go into $180,000 in debt like I did, but I would still trust them with my own mother. But their glass ceiling is their inability to access this information, right? But I think now with like courses, especially with the one you've designed, because obviously I wouldn't have you on the podcast. I would just make up shitty excuses to not do this if I didn't think the course was any good.
You don't do anything you don't want to do.
Eh?
You don't do anything you don't want to do.
Exactly. And that's one of the benefits of my lifestyle is I record this at 2:15 in the afternoon while most people are at work. But I just think that there's enough people amassing with good experience that just don't have haven't gone through like the systematic ring roll, and it is a fucking ring roll. Trust me, every time I pay back my student loans, it's like I just want to like go to San Jose with a ski mask and start beating people with a hammer. But like every time I do that, it's like I almost respect the people who didn't do it more. Right? Like people are just like, fuck that. That's a dumb decision.
Yeah.
Why would you do
I did
that?
the same thing as you.
Yeah.
5 years, 100 grand in debt.
Yeah, sweet, right? Like
Go us.
They're gonna just carve a balance on my tombstone. There's not even going to be like a here lies Jordan. It's not going to be day I born, day I died. It's like, yeah, he made it to like $117,000 in debt, put him in the ground. But I think now, like, to maybe put a bow on this point, was like, there's higher level information. There's a market now. Because I think people for the longest time, we have Netflix and we have Amazon Prime and Instagram and fucking TikTok. And like clearly people have small attention spans, or so we get so we get sold the idea, right? And you see educators like making fucking TikTok videos. Like, no, Alex Marquez, if you're listening to this, I'm not getting on TikTok because like part of it's entertaining and we can sit here and like kind of chew the fat, as our good friend Nick Daniel says. But like, there's something that if you're going to want to play on the same level and disrupt the hierarchical distribution of information that's sort of based in like the way the education systems work up till now, you have to take something away from it. It has to be different, obviously, like with the online component. Outside education platforms have been using that. Now universities are catching up because they're forced to. But it's like there's some things that you want to take away from it without mimicking it entirely. Like I always think of like Tesla uses fish to learn about like hydrodynamics and aerodynamics. A Tesla doesn't have gills, right? So it's like an airplane flies like a bird, but it doesn't really fly like a bird. Like engineers are trying to figure out like how the fuck are we going to get these 737 wings to fly? So I think the cool thing about like decentralized education is that it just takes the good, like, an airplane goes, okay, look, it has to fly. A bird flies. Great. Aerodynamics, we can use that. What about these flapping wings? It's a machine. It's not going to work, right? Like, and in the same way, like we look at course design now, I think it's a similar, like comparable analogy to make is like, okay, what is the like epicenter, the core of what this thing was supposed to do but isn't doing now? Why is the education system failing? And then how is it that we can bridge that gap while still keeping the essence of it? Like, how can we make this thing fly without having to make steel bird wings?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this all the time, whereas like personal trainers are upskilling. Like personal trainers are becoming like they're the first point of reference for the client. Like client is going to go to a personal trainer before they go see a physio clinician or like a GP or something like that. So they have such an ability to make such a difference to a person's life. And I'm going to speak from an experience that I had growing up. When I first started having my period, I was getting irregular periods. And so first thing I did is I went to a doctor, and the doctor put me on the pill to regulate them. And now that's it wasn't for contraception or anything like that, but it was something that masked the problem, and something that, after 5 years of being on it and then deciding to go off it, I had to go through again. It was lifestyle things that made such the difference. It was, having to regulate my training, having to increase my calories, having to do stress management and sleep and supplements and lifestyle techniques. And that's what actually fixed the problem. I wasn't just masking it with a medication or something like that. And yeah, like going back to the education side of things, I think if people knew this before they went to someone, like, same thing if you've got knee pain and you go to a doctor and you might get referred to a surgeon or something like that. Like, you don't know any better that, function and structure. Like if you go to a trainer, like a really good trainer who knows, their stuff about function and knee function and, how structure works and everything like that, it might not necessarily be something that you need to treat medically. It can be something that you, by just changing your lifestyle and working through training and things like that, that you can make such a difference to someone's life, someone's quality of life. And I think, this stuff is common. Like there's so many women who, might think that, PMS or like really severe cramping during the month or things like that is common. Like they might think, they speak to their friends and they think, it's just something that they have to live with. But if they're educated on it, and if say they bring it up to a coach, and it could be a female coach, could be a male coach, but like if it's a male coach, like I suggest, wait for them to bring it up for you. Don't like, go all in and be like, have a little bit of, think of it. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. You know, let them bring it up, but then, you know, you have that behind you and you can give some advice on that, and you can say, you know, well, let's have a look at, you know, stress management and sleep and like your training and like regulating your training and, you know, how much calories you're eating, and just making those lifestyle changes and just knowing about it as well, and not just dismissing it, because I think, you know, we love to talk, like women love to talk, and
that's why
we don't necessarily. Hey,
that's why I bought noise cancelling headphones.
I don't talk that much. Come on. We don't necessarily. We're not necessarily always looking like even for that solution. We're looking for like more of like an understanding and like, you know, some empathy and things like that. So even if you're not the one to make those changes, at least you can sort of understand and, you know, give her that sort of understanding and empathy and things like that to help her through.
I feel
We're having a counseling session now.
It's just, yeah, well, I mean, it's hard because like a lot of, so engineering has a certain, like, when they think about disproportionate representatives of gender in professions, engineering is disproportionately represented by men, right? Because men are interested in things. Right, and in the healthcare field, and this kind of like pokes a big hole in like the female or the male patriarchy thing that most physicians my sister's a real doctor, right? Like she cares about people. That's why like she goes into a hospital every day. I don't give a fuck. So that's why I work on a laptop, right? If I see a barista and someone that checks me in at the gym, and that's the only people I see all day, sweet.
You care.
Well, yeah, but I have my people, and they know who they are. But like. Because you met my father, like Dad is, so the intro to my book.
Love Mike Shello.
Yeah, the intro to my book, and he's not to know this yet, but he's probably going to listen, is about a time where we were at a wedding in Florida when I was 11, and there was like a floating candle in like this thing of water, but the vase it was in would trap the heat, and you know basic combustion, like the fire requires oxygen. The carbon dioxide emitted from the flame would actually choke out the candle from staying lit. So it's like these people are up there, they're second or third cousins. And Dad couldn't tell you a single word of any one of the speeches because he was building a little like raft for like this floating candle. Because I'm like, and I'm very much like my dad in that way. It's like there's a problem. A, I'm in a wedding in Florida, but B, the problem is this candle isn't staying lit. I'm going to create a solution for this.
Yeah.
Right. And I think if there's one takeaway that, like, you know, again, use it wherever you may, like the idea, and this is where my brain just like red wire touches the blue wire, and like Neo takes the red and the blue pill. I just don't understand. Like I don't understand. I'm aware of it. And that's the first step, is like the fact that someone can come to you with a problem and the answer is you understand the problem. Like, that's like a backwards world. And I'm sure there's like, and I know most of you guys that listen to the podcast now, there's thousands of you, but I feel like I know most of you. Guys will listen to this, and I can think of like a handful of guys in my head that'll listen to this, and like they'll have like a mini aneurysm. Like their like eyes will start to twitch. Like, what do you mean? Like, I'd be like, oh, what's a really hard problem?
Because people give what they want, right? So guys want solutions to things, so they give solutions.
Well, the world kind of requires that we come up with solutions. Like, oh, fuck diabetes, no worries, insulin. Solution. We can't go diabetes. Yeah, you know. Have good luck with that 1 foot. That's going to really suck.
Yeah, but when it comes to people and like emotions and things like that, like emotions are real in women. So like going back to the thing with like male trainers, it's like just talk to them. Like, it's not always about, you know, the program. It's just it's about, or training, like it's about just, you know, like we said, you know, the older females with the money that are hiring the younger male trainers, it's like they probably just want someone to talk to. And it's like, yeah, get your training done. Like, don't be one of those people that just, you know, stands there and talks to your client the whole time. But, you know, like at the start of a session or something, just, you know, like, how are the kids, or, you know, what's going on. And that creating that relationship is the most important thing you can do, because they'll stay with you forever. Like, women we're loyal. Like if we, you know, if they like you, you know, they're going to stay with you. So yeah, just making sure that you're being empathetic. You don't necessarily have to fix everything, you know, oh, like my husband's doing this and blah, blah, blah. Well, like maybe you should do that. Like, you know, she doesn't want to hear that. It's just like, you know, oh, like I'm so sorry to hear that and things like that. So that's probably like one of the biggest pieces of advice I could give to like males listening.
But I think the selling point is it buys you time, right? Like, because what I've found in like from teaching first principles is like, what you're trying to peak is buy-in. But when you can start to make these little decisions, and most people will look at like the level of depth and detail that like you and I look at things, I'd be like, oh, that's unnecessary. It's like, well, maybe you're just not ready for it yet. But if you can buy yourself time, and then you can start to get that buy-in, the little things you learn and apply, they don't add up, they multiply. Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of trainers like, you know, they get a couple results, maybe they get some good transformations, they have good clients, good adherence. And like for every program that's scientifically like bullshit, like you look at, I don't know, P90X or the cabbage soup diet, like there's enough people in the world that someone got jacked on a dumb program, right? We could find a handful of people that we could put up a transformation post
and females want that quick fix too, like, you know.
Right, but I think like having like to understand empathy and to be taught that contextually through learning like actual physiological principles and first principles rather than like if this, do that. Like with Stu that teaches the barbell course, like always talks about heuristics, which I think is an interesting subset of like an algorithm. Like a heuristic is technically an algorithm, but it's not necessarily a standard set of rules. Like I think the empathy will give you the opportunity, because like males will be like, I don't know if I should do this. It's like, if you get if you have empathy and you can get the buy-in, right, then all of a sudden what you can do is, as you learn like these physiological contrasts, you can actually start to mask some of your decisions in solving problems, right? And again, like you don't have to come out and be, well, because this and like, I don't know, Jupiter's in fucking retrograde or some shit. I'm clearly speaking out of my ass here. I'm going to get yelled at. I'm sleeping on the couch tonight, fellas. But like,
no, I don't know that either.
You don't have to like you don't have to, you know, proclaim it as you're doing it.
Yeah.
As 100%. You're like, oh, but you're like, oh, let's adjust. You know, we might be in this stage, and you know, this hormone is higher than this one, and this means that, you know, cellular metabolism is going to be this, likely going to have a better response to this volume intensity. And then what comes out of your fucking mouth isn't, you know, hey, I'm like now a like obstetrics and, you know, gynecological physician. It's, we're going to do sets of 15 today.
Yeah.
And we're going to cut the rest periods, right? But decisions like that, and I think like you mentioned before, because like some of my best clients, whether current or past, were they just have buy-in, right? Like where they're, you know, like you said, like their husband, like, oh, that son of a bitch. Like that was my first answer. And I would say it like that. And like they would stick around long enough that I'd be like, oh, okay, like... All right, but if you don't have that, you're fucked, right? And then because it's, I think with training females, in my experience, and like, you know, as you develop the course and like watching your thought process around it, is like, it is the age-old saying of no one cares what you know until they know that you care. Mm-hmm. Like guys don't give a fuck what I care. Like, what if I don't give, like, there's no conversation about that.
Just do this.
Well, kind of, yeah. And like some, you know, over time, like a lot of my clients that I work with now are like exclusive, and like, you know, we're on the phone. I might talk to a client more in a week than I might talk to you sometimes, for better or for worse. What's up, guys? But I think I've never had a female client where like there wasn't, like that wasn't a big thing with them. Like at some point, like, we went out to dinner. We drove an hour and 45 minutes both ways to have dinner with one of my female clients, right? Like, that's something like there's 4 or 5 people I know in this small town right now that, sorry, fellas, like, I don't know, I'll catch you on the gram, like, not going to happen. I'm like, yeah, sweet, whatever. But like, you go out of the way. And I think if you want to, I think a trainer like should be fairly versatile, because your client base, unless you have exclusion criteria set out that I only train men, if you're going to take on a female client, like, you better know, right? Like, I have exclusion criteria. No bowlers. No fucking bowlers. If you're a bowler and you want to come train with me, forget about it. You're out. Because I've never fucking bowled, right? So, it's like, if you're going to have the audacity to take people's money, you got to have skin in the game, right? Like you got to have some skin in the game. Like you have to invest in that being a service you can provide. Otherwise, like I hate to say this, but like from an experience standpoint and like how upset I get when people like take on athletes that they probably shouldn't have taken on, but it's just opportunity. That it's like, you don't have any skin in the game. Like you don't have any experience. You haven't invested in your education in this field. You know, you've been limited given the, you know, your career path and the glass ceiling of access to information that you have. You haven't even sought out alternate means of gaining this experience or this information. And now there's plenty of it available to you. Like, shame on you. Like if your exclusion criteria is who has enough money to pay me, you better have, you know, a lot of education in a lot of different topics, because you're going to get a lot of different people. So, all that being said, I'm just, you know, I don't want to say shamefully, because I feel no shame in anything I do, clearly, as I present myself in public the way I do. But no, I think it lends a bit of context to the male trainer going, why would I invest in female physiology course? And like, but here's the thing, invest in the course as a male, right? Like don't be another co-host on The View.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think a lot of times, like, there are stereotypes of male trainers that, in my experience, being like probably the most on the surface stereotype you could be. When people hire me as a trainer, like when I was a trainer way, way, way back when I was training at Stanford, every client I got looked at my fucking like arms crossed. Everyone else was smiling. My like arms were crossed in my photo. And they're like, I wanted you to be that. Right? They didn't want Bridget Jones's diary. Like they wanted fucking, you know, military kind of, but over time you did develop a relationship. So I think, you know, don't do it for the money. Do it because you like people.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, is like their own identity as a trainer, because they're always inundated by like the Joneses on social. So it's like, they're like, oh, I'm going to do this now because Jordan said it was good for me. Like, no, do it because like it's good for people. And if you worry about taking care of your people and they get results, and these small things that you can apply and the overarching principles you can apply will not add up, they'll multiply, and then you'll actually get the results that you want. Did I do a good job?
Yeah, real good.
Yeah, sweet. So
Good
I'm not
one.
sleeping on the couch?
No.
Okay. I feel like we're going to have an odd number of requests for more episodes like this. It can only
What, just you and me?
It can only bode bad for me.
Just the bants?
It can only be bad for me.
Oh, come on.
Well, it's like, no, because the more it's the reversion to the mean principle.
I love chatting to you.
Yeah, but it's like the house always wins, and like you're the house. Like I'm gonna lose. Like your best game of your best odds in the casino, if I'm not mistaken, are putting all your money on one hand of blackjack. Because your odds, you know, the reversion to that mean of like, look, the odds are never stacked in your favor. If you play enough time, you'll lose all your money. So I feel like the more people request, like, oh, you guys should do more podcasts, it's like I'm gonna end up sleeping in a car I don't own.
You never will.
Yeah, we'll see about that. But anyways, okay, so we'll close off on that. So Applied Women's Physiology and Training course starts. It's up for sale now. So go to KaylaLeePhysio.com. I'll put all the stuff in the show notes. Instagram at Kayla Lee Physio.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, again,
Mid-August start.
Mid-August start.
Yeah.
So right now we're on to 2 class times.
Yep.
So for those of you familiar with the level 1 course, similar kind of format in the sense that, look, we understand you guys can't make live lectures given time zones, and you're all over the globe right now. There's UK, there's Australia, and there's North America. I
think we've got India as well.
India, South Africa. Regardless, there's a lot of
South
countries.
Africa, yeah.
So as the slots fill up, keeping the Zoom calls a little bit smaller, just to make sure the concepts get relayed. More times will open up, but at a certain point there might be a cap. So jump on that. It's
The name?
8 weeks, 10 weeks.
8 weeks.
8-week course. So
Yeah.
runs
8 weeks, 8 modules. Do you want me to run through the modules, or they can check it out? in the show
I would
notes?
say leave something to the imagination.
Yeah.
So if you guys want more information on the modules, KayleePhysio.com, Instagram at KayleePhysio. She's usually answering questions via voice note for the majority of the day. So if you have questions on it, just drop it in the direct message, as it were, or email info@KayleePhysio.com.
Beautiful.
Did I do
Look
it?
at you
It's
go.
almost like I host a podcast for a living. All right.
Well done.
Thanks. I don't know.
And-
I'll see you at dinner, lunch. I've never had to end a podcast this way.